I want to climb to the top of the rock outcropping so that I can get a wider view of the plain beyond.
Okay, make a climb roll.
All right, here's my roll. That's a 1 plus my climb modifier of a 6.
You start falling. Roll your climb again.
This time it's a 2 on the die.
You tumble slowly down the scree, taking, how many HP do you have? 6 damage.
While nothing conclusive can be said about the exchange that we just witnessed, I think more than a few alarm bells were ringing among you in the audience. That something called fudging might have been occurring there. That's the moments where a die roll, an invocation of a fortune mechanic in a tabletop role-playing game, is indicating a result which is contrary often to what the game master has in mind. It's a moment where the fortune mechanic and its results are thrown out in the moment. The game master adds additional hit points to a monster, takes those hit points away to make the monster easier, adjusts the difficulty of a given roll up or down after the dice have been thrown, or changes the meaning of success and failure for things like a saving throw or a task attempt in the moment to suit what they believe to be the interests of the story or the interests of fun. At least that's the narrative, that's the defense of fudging that most people will throw out. They will tell you that that's why they do it. In this video, I'm going to examine what sort of signal the game is sending us as a game master, as a group, when things like that happen. Should we throw out those invocations of fortune, or should we tune up and take those moments as a signal to continue to build our skills in understanding when to roll the dice and how to interpret success and failure? There are deeply held beliefs about this topic. There are folks that want to play their way and feel very challenged when any discussion about this topic comes up. Tread lightly. Consider whether you are up to listening to what I have to say in what follows. I hope that it will be something that is helpful, that will build your contemplations about tabletop role-playing and give you an avenue to improve your skills. And perhaps leave you feeling happier about the presence and the role of the dice in the role-playing games you play. If you're interested in that sort of thing, and if you are in the state of mind to receive it, then enter. I'm the Complex Games Apologist. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to treat primarily with the defense of fudging, which revolves around, hey, everybody does it sometimes. Haven't you ever needed to do this for the sake of the story or to make sure everybody has fun? There are, of course, other defenses of fudging. Some revolve around storytelling. The game master having strong intentions about how things should go and making it happen, whether the dice like it or not. There are other defenses which revolve around illusionism, or razzle-dazzle-um sort of prospect that it doesn't really matter if nobody finds out. I'm not really going to treat with that one either. So let's return to that core defense or apology for fudging. There are emergencies sometimes. I put it to you that if an emergency has arisen, then that's an indication that best practices have room to improve. What I mean by that is that when we're looking at these die rolls and we're saying, ooh, that is not the best, is there a way to have fewer of these not the best kind of situations? Is there a way to look at the die roll and, in consultation with the system and our genre expectations, see it in a different light so that we aren't saying that's not the best, but instead we're relishing how the story is unfolding because we interpret that die roll differently. So there are three avenues that this goes down. The first is the die rolls that you don't make. The second is, how do we interpret the successes and failures? What's the true meaning of success and failure in the role-playing system and with the kind of roles that we're calling for? And the third is the perspective of the non-player characters, the world, and the player characters, the intent that's going into those moments that lead up to the die rolls. What sort of actions are people taking? What are they trying to do? So first, let's talk about the die rolls that you don't make. You may be familiar with this piece of kind of cornerstone advice, which is to call upon the dice when both success and failure are interesting. More specifically, different role-playing games will have more guidance about that. As an example, difficulty 0 tasks don't necessarily take a die roll in 2die20 system games, and difficulty 1 tasks do require a die roll. And the question of whether something is 0 or 1 is a question of, would it be challenging for the sort of protagonist that this story is about? In other words, the question absolutely comes down to genre expectations. Is it challenging for a person like Conan or the protagonist of a Star Trek television show, those kind of hyper-competent Jacques Cousteau astronauts of the skies? In the case of the example that we began this video with, we might be imagining a heroic high fantasy ranger or the like, who's climbing onto a pinnacle to scout. Are they under any kind of pressure? Is this the sort of thing that would be challenging? Have they done it before? And this is another interesting light to consider the question of, should something be a die roll or not? Has the protagonist attempted this before and found themselves equal or unequal to the task? That can answer whether we should be rolling the dice. There's a very old Lindy Beige video that I will point out to you where he suggests that perhaps sometimes when someone walks up to a wall and tries to climb it, rather than testing whether the protagonist is equal to the wall, whether his efforts are equal to it, sometimes we might be rolling for what sort of wall it is. Is it coincidentally a wall that lines up with this protagonist's abilities, their own grip strength, their own cunning with finding footholds and handholds? If they've done it before, would they have to roll to do it again? I can climb this tree because I've climbed this tree before. So that's another way to ask yourself whether there are moments where perhaps we could roll the dice fewer times. Next, let's look at the question of what success really means in the system that you're playing in and with the genre expectations that you're playing with, and what failure really means according to the system and within genre expectations. An example of this is that a lot of folks look at the roll of the D20 in a game like Dungeons & Dragons as something with inbuilt margins of success and failure. If the DC is 12, then an 18 is better than a 12, and a 9 is not as bad as a 2 in the total. Well, that's made up. It's not in the book. It's something which a lot of folks play with. It's something which can inform your narration, perhaps, if you wish it to. But the idea that that ranger that climbed on that pinnacle to scout and their die roll was lower, and thus perhaps that's what led to them falling, is something which has been interjected totally outside of the mechanics, and it's confounding the question of whether it should be a die roll or not. So I put it to you that possibly the whole critical success and critical failure kinds of ideas, if you're interjecting them outside of the paradigm of the system with house rules or just with your prerogative as the game master, you may be leading yourself into more frequent situations where you feel like you have to ignore the dice than you might if you weren't playing with that kind of interpretation of the absolute number. Another thing to do is to consult with the true meaning of failure and success in the system that you're playing in. So, for example, in Burning Wheel, there is the idea of roll once and let it ride. Once you've rolled, that success or failure kind of pays through the entirety of the situation. If you're trying to run away from someone and you've successfully kind of run faster than them or outwitted them as far as your ability to evade within the terrain of a forest or a moorland, then that one roll will get you to an escape within the paradigm of Burning Wheel's rules. Likewise, in Burning Wheel, the meaning of success means that the character's intent is realized. Anything less than success means that what you intended to happen doesn't happen the way that you wanted it to. If I was to project this onto a 2die20 system example, for example, leaping a chasm, and I set the difficulty at a 2 to jump across, and the character did not meet that, it may not mean that they plunge to the bottom rather than finding themselves on their feet on the other side. Their intention was to leap and find themselves on their feet on the far side. So what is less than that intent? It could be slamming chest first into the far side of the chasm to take a few stress of damage. There's some pretty useful guidance in Star Trek Adventures to have it in mind what success and what failure looks like before you send the player to the dice, before they start purchasing dice with momentum or threat or even spending currency like determination. In a game like D&D, this could be a matter of using potions to prepare more for a climb check, or getting help from your friends in the form of a guidance spell cast. It's kind of a similar textures to momentum and threat in a different system paradigm. Or it could even be a matter of the player spending determination in 2die20 or inspiration in D&D. Sometimes it comes down to good telegraphing and good messaging about what the gravity of the role is. And this can lead to more situations where the outcomes of the roles are within genre and more accepted by everybody as making sense. And after the dice are thrown, we can take a cue from some of the partial success and fail forward mechanics that are out there in the hobby. An example of this is the whole fail forward yes and world of Powered by the Apocalypse roles. Similarly, there's a success at cost opportunity that the game master can offer in Star Trek Adventures. You can tell a player, well, you make it across, but you're going to need to let go of your tricorder because it's a narrow thing and you have to grab a bush in order to find your feet on the far side. Do they accept? Or do they want to land on their chest and take that damage, which might injure them, further leading to them falling the rest of the way? There's a cause and effect chain as the result of the die roll unfolds, which it may be useful to open a window to interacting with the player and the character with, rather than simply starting to call for more dice, changing the numbers, or bringing everybody out of the fiction with in a clearly adjusted result. Sometimes a little bit of role playing, a little bit more fiction, rather than rewinding and overwriting, can lead to fewer situations with a fudging moment. And that segues us neatly into the third area where there might be room to improve. That idea of information flow and intent. Because how many times have you said to a player something like, are you sure you want to do that? Often as a means of telegraphing that there might be something more perilous about what they're about to attempt than they may have estimated. Well, it turns out that there are some aspects of this which we as game masters might need to take heed of. When the monsters are attacking for that final kill shot, is it really in character and in genre what they're trying to do? Perhaps the best example of this of all time from film is when Luke Skywalker, battered, bruised, and one hand less for wear, effectively at 0 hit points, is, rather than struck down by Darth Vader, offered a chance
To join.
in the same way that many of us are familiar with reminding players to look before they leap, to heed the information that's in play before they move to an intent. We might do well to heed a little bit of that same logic when it comes to our NPCs. Lord Vader heeds that Luke Skywalker is at 0 HP and that Lord Vader has goals other than the simple death of Luke Skywalker in mind. So sometimes some of those kill shots that get adjusted downward in damage, maybe the NPC is looking to disarm, is looking to demoralize, or to offer some kind of surrender to the player character. Just a thought that may lead to fewer of those moments and more fiction. And that's it, folks. That's the video. I actually don't want to shake anyone's foundations today, particularly, or call anyone out playing the game wrong or that sort of thing. I have moments myself where I look down in the dice and I say, oh,
I've made some mistakes.
But I've come to look at those moments as an opportunity for me to learn my chops a bit more. And I wanted to share what's next once I recognize that this is an opportunity for improvement. Maybe the moments at your game table where you feel a little bit of a pull to fudge something are instead opportunities. If your table has a developed culture about what a climb roll means, then the character will often make preparations. The player will narrate how they're getting out the rope and they're tapping in those iron spikes and pitons into the wall. And for that matter, when the enemies are very certain that they're going to kill a player character on the next strike, they may instead instruct them to flee, surrender, or offer them a deal. The autumn is hopefully going to be an updates-rich place here on the channel, and I would encourage you to like and subscribe, and when you see videos that are especially penetrating insights, which I guess I have occasionally, then please share them to places in the internet, because I'm retiring a little bit from social media. I deleted my Facebook, and I'm really trying to focus on creating as much content here on the channel because it's a fulfilling place to talk to people and create value in these strange times. And so I'm going to be leaning on you, the audience, to find the highlights which are worth growing the audience towards. The next thing I'm working on is a walkthrough of character creation and an examination of that mechanic in Star Trek Adventures, which is something which has been a long time coming. If you have any questions or suggestions, thoughts about things that I should treat with in that video, then go ahead and leave it in the comments below. If you think that I'm a wild and crazy guy to suggest that fudging is just a sign for us to tune ourselves up, well, go ahead and give it to me in the comments or give me a thumbs down. I'm the Complex Games Apologist. I hope you're having a great autumn. Take care, folks.